You'll be looking for your libido on Pornhub or on dirty magazines or on Instagram or on OnlyFans, and you won't find it anywhere. It's strange. You look for your libido everywhere, every possible form of stimulation you can find. Nothing does it for you. Vigorous Steve here. At your request, the ultimate anti-libido stack. Particular drug combinations that you should avoid if you care about libido. Now, as you'll see from this video, these combinations of particular performance-enhancing drugs are actually quite common during the off-season. Testosterone, Nandrolone, MK677, and perhaps a little bit of weed to take the edge off or stimulate appetite. Actually quite common during the off-season, but these particular drug combinations can affect libido in a negative sense, quite dramatically. And now you have all this additional muscle tissue, you're jacked, you're huge, you got a lot of pushing power around the hips, ability to move mountains, but no emotional incentive to put this physique to work. What's the point, right? So that's what we'll discuss in this video. These are drug combinations that you should avoid. This is for harm reduction. Please don't copy these protocols and try to attempt it for yourself. You might end up huge, but you might end up huge without libido and perhaps acne and perhaps gynecomastia, right? This stack would also be the ultimate gynecomastia stack with a couple of modifications, and also be the ultimate acne stack if you add in a little bit of dairy products and a little bit of cheese here and there. It would also result in acne. This is basically the stack to give you the worst hormone imbalance you could probably get when you're using performance-enhancing drugs. And it's the hormone imbalance that has a negative effect on libido or acne formation or gynecomastia. And it's a particular hormone imbalance, especially when estradiol, progesterone, and prolactin are high. And these particular drug combinations will give you high estrogen, high progesterone, or hypergestrogenic effects, resulting in high prolactin. So let's discuss that all in this video. I have a little bit of acne, as you can probably see. My libido is still good, and gynecomastia is not progressing any further than is currently present. But again, hormone imbalance dictates how many side effects you're going to experience. And this is the main reason why I wrote an entire ebook called Off-Season Cycles with Bioidentical Hormones, to prevent hormonal imbalance while you're taking exogenous bioidentical hormones like testosterone, DHEA, pregnenolone, and regulate your estradiol in favorable ranges. So these are, again, drug combinations you should not be attempting, but it's actually quite common for the guys that are a little bit uninitiated when it comes to particular drug combinations, because they've researched each compound individually, but don't understand how much of a negative overlap these performance-enhancing drugs can have on libido, acne, or gynecomastia formation. So let's just start with good old testosterone. Any dose will do on this particular cocktail of PEDs, because testosterone ultimately downregulates the hypothalamic pituitary testes axis and the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. Testosterone is high. If you don't use an aromatase inhibitor, your estradiol is high, but your estrone and estriol might not be as similar as on a natural functioning HPTA, where testosterone, estradiol, estrone, estriol are all balanced according to your endogenous hormone production. And when you go with exogenous hormones, testosterone is high, estriol is high, or estradiol is high, but your DHEA and pregnenolone is low. And it's this hormone balance between testosterone, estradiol, DHEA and pregnenolone, and perhaps estrone or estriol, that contributes to libido highly, as well as progesterone, right? When you have a normally functioning hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, you produce pregnenolone in the adrenals, and then metabolizes into progesterone and allopregnenolone downstream, which also contribute to libido, right? Endogenous production of hormones, given that they're all sufficient, you're used to this ideal balance between all of the sex hormones and neurosteroids, and that in most cases gives you good libido, considering that your relationship is good, not too much stress, right? Your finances are solid, and you feel respected in the field that you're working in. All of these things can negatively affect libido as well. But as soon as you jump on the testosterone gain train, you start to downregulate or skew the ratio between sex hormones and neurosteroids. That's why, some guys like to take ACG or HMG on cycle, or they go with supplemental DHEA or pregnenolone, right? But in this protocol, for the unaware, we're just going with testosterone. Any dose will do. HPTA and HPAA is downregulated, and the overall hormone balance worsens. Now, to make that worse, as part of the off-season, we're going to add some Nandrolone, right? Now, let's say 3 times the amount, because let's say you're running testosterone replacement therapy dosages, 100 milligrams, 150 milligrams, 200 milligrams, generous hormone replacement therapy for bodybuilders, and then you want most of the anabolism from Nandrolone. Maybe because you're suffering from hair loss, you want a little bit of testosterone in your system, but not so much testosterone that it converts into dihydrotestosterone, contributing to hair loss. So in this hypothetical scenario, you're thinking about hair loss predominantly. You're on hormone replacement therapy of testosterone, DHEA and pregnenolone levels are, kind of in the bottom middle of the reference range. Your estrogen is favorable on testosterone only at hormone replacement therapy dosages. And then you add in the Nandrolone as your main anabolic for the off-season. Let's say 300 milligrams, 400, 500, 600, 1,000, whatever dose of Nandrolone you prefer. As soon as you add the Nandrolone in, testosterone is going to convert into estradiol. Now, Nandrolone is actually bioidentical, but there's no reference range for Nandrolone in the bloodstream. Nandrolone is a metabolic intermediate in the conversion of testosterone into estradiol. So when testosterone enters the aromatase enzymes, a little bit of Nandrolone is produced before it converts into estradiol. And when you take Nandrolone exogenously, it appears that this conversion of testosterone into estradiol is optimized, or you get additional aromatization of testosterone into estradiol. Could be because Nandrolone also has been shown in certain cases to increase aromatase enzyme activity. So whether it optimizes the conversion of testosterone into estrogen at the aromatase enzyme site, or it actually produces more aromatase enzymes by itself, both of those scenarios contribute, and you see that serum estradiol concentrations rise rapidly as soon as you add Nandrolone to a hormone replacement therapy dose of testosterone. Now, if you're going with pretty high dosages of Nandrolone, this aromatization just speeds up, and you really see very, very high serum concentrations of estradiol. Now, I mentioned many times before that estradiol contributes to libido, but there's a sweet spot. There's an ideal range, and you still have to keep the relation to the testosterone, dihydrotestosterone, and the other neurosteroids in consideration, or progesterone even. You have to keep those ratios, ideal ranges into consideration. So if your testosterone is somewhat superphysiological, let's say a little bit over the reference range because you're using hormone replacement therapy dosages, and your Nandrolone intake is sky high to facilitate anabolism, and your estradiol is sky high, way over the reference range, gynecomastia territory, twice out of the reference range, let's say 100, 125, 150 picograms per milliliter. That's 2 times, 3 times, 4 times out of the reference range. Yeah, your libido will not be so good. Really, your libido will be horrible. And the problem with Nandrolone is also that it's a progestogenic compound. It's a 19-nor. It acts on the progesterone receptor with about 20% the relative binding affinity compared to progesterone. But when you're on 200 milligrams of Nandrolone, or 500 or 1,000 milligrams of Nandrolone, the relatively binding effect that you're going to get from this incredibly high dose of Nandrolone at the receptor site is so far above and beyond what you would get from a little bit of progesterone that you're producing in normal HPTA functioning, where the pregnenolone converts into progesterone and has a little bit of receptor binding at the progesterone receptor site. So an incredibly high dose of Nandrolone will stimulate the progesterone receptor in breast tissue, in skin tissue, and in the pituitary gland quite significantly. So now by adding Nandrolone, we have high estrogen and a lot of progestogenic activity at the receptor site. Now you guys can already guess where we're going with this. High prolactin. All right, now you have all three. All three. That's a recipe for gynecomastia, but it's also a recipe for horrible libido, because prolactin regulates libido, it regulates erection quality, and it also regulates the refractory period in between ejaculation. So when you ejaculate, for example, prolactin goes up, inhibiting consecutive erections and consecutive ejaculations. Now, when you're a little bit younger, it doesn't really affect you, but as you get older, it does start to affect you. You can bypass that a little bit with higher dosages of vitamin B6, B5P, let's say 200 to 300 milligrams per day. Or you can downregulate prolactin secretion from the pituitary gland with a dopamine receptor agonist like cabergoline or pramipexole or bromocriptine, right? Those are all the medicinal dopamine receptor agonists, but you can actually increase dopamine concentrations by taking vitamins B6, P5P. And I think even modafinil has a little bit of a dopaminergic effect on the pituitary gland. It also has been shown to lower prolactin levels. So in this particular drug combination, those are not allowed because just testosterone and nandrolone will raise estrogen, raise progestogenic activity, and concurrently prolactin will go up significantly as well. So just by taking these two compounds together in a skewed ratio, hormone replacement therapy of testosterone and disproportionate high amounts of nandrolone as your sole anabolic compound, recipe for poor libido and a recipe for acne and also a recipe for gynecomastia formation. But we can make it worse. We can make it far worse. Let's say you get gynecomastia and you read on the internet that raloxifine is potent enough to prevent the formation of gynecomastia. And you want to block the estrogen receptors at the receptor site in breast tissue with raloxifine because you feel that it's the most potent at what it does. And you read a couple anecdotal evidence that raloxifine is able to reverse gynecomastia without the need for surgery. I've yet to see it, but apparently there's some anecdotal evidence out there that raloxifine is able to reverse a little bit of gynecomastia. I'm probably going to run an experiment in the future with raloxifine, see if that's true. And otherwise I'm going to, go with surgery, get it removed that way. So let's say you go with raloxifine in this hormone replacement therapy dose of testosterone and superphysiological dose of nandrolone to prevent gynecomastia formation by blocking the estrogen receptors in breast tissue. You didn't account for the estrogen-like effect in the liver, raising sex hormone binding globulin concentrations. Now that's besides the additional sex hormone binding globulin concentrations you're going to get with an insanely high amount of serum estradiol that's now floating around by combining testosterone with nandrolone. So you get high sex hormone binding globulin from estradiol, and you get high sex hormone binding globulin from the raloxifine. Perhaps you're running 30 to 60 milligrams of raloxifine, and that's your sex hormone binding globulin is probably 120 nanomoles per liter. So the little amount of free testosterone that you had, contributing to libido in a positive sense, is now gone, bound up, not able to be contributing to libido in any way, shape, or form. Luckily, sex hormone binding globulin will also bind up additional estradiol and additional nandrolone, so maybe the overall side effect burden is going to be a little bit less. But it's safe to say anything over 50 nanomoles per liter in your sex hormone binding globulin at any dose of testosterone, nandrolone, estradiol, etc. is not going to be favorable for libido. For libido, from what I've noticed myself and most of my clients on their blood work, if sex hormone binding globulin hovers around 20, 25, 30, in those cases, libido is usually good. And then depending on particular drug combinations, it can be a little bit lower. Let's say you combine testosterone with primobolan or masterone, for example, or proviron. In those cases, sex hormone binding globulin is maybe 10, 15, maybe 20, depending on the dose and the injection frequency and how well you're managing your estradiol. But libido can still be good, right? So it doesn't mean that if you crush your sex hormone binding globulin, your libido is going to be horrible. In most cases, it will be. But there's a sweet spot for sex hormone binding globulin. And combining high estrogen with raloxifine is not going to get your sex hormone binding globulin in the sweet spot. It sounds familiar, right? Oh, test, nandrolone, raloxifine, I should be good because estradiol is also anabolic and I want to get the most amount of anabolism out of this off-season cycle. Yeah, libido will be non-existent. Really, guys, be careful. Now, you can make it even worse. Let's say this high nandrolone is giving you some water retention, right? And I've seen some guys during the off-season, they resort to Aldactone. They want to inhibit the mineralocorticoid receptor in the kidneys, promote sodium excretion, or prevent sodium reuptake, which Nandrolone also has its unique characteristics on the renin, vasopressin, and angiotensin receptor system. So Nandrolone will promote sodium retention. And some guys will resort, well, of course, high estrogen also promotes the sodium retention, and a skewed renin vasopressin system contributing to even more water retention. So let's say it's your last resort. You want to use a little bit of a diuretic, and you heard that Aldactone is actually medically prescribed to prevent acne that you're now also suffering from because of this very high estrogen. And the relatively high serum concentrations of estradiol are also affecting the renin and vasopressin system negatively to the point you get even more water retention. So now you're thinking about Aldactone, blocking the mineralocorticoid receptor in the kidneys to help with sodium excretion or prevent sodium reuptake, which is otherwise promoted by taking Nandrolone and having high serum estradiol concentrations. And you read a little bit of evidence that Aldactone is able to prevent acne, which is now also occurring by blocking the androgen receptor. So even though you might look a little bit leaner and the water weight and the bloat is coming off by taking 25 milligrams of Aldactone per day, over time it starts to act as an anti-androgen, blocking the androgen receptor from binding testosterone and binding Nandrolone, resulting in even more aromatization and more dihydrotestosterone concentrations, because now less testosterone or Nandrolone is getting to the androgen receptor, serum concentrations rise a little bit, and aromatase activity or 5-alpha reductase activity is also increasing. I've heard this, guys. I've heard these combinations firsthand. Steve, why is my libido not so good? I'm taking Test, Nandrolone, and Aldactone to prevent water retention. And everything is unregulated. Everything is up and down and sideways. And yeah, they get good results in the gym, even though they don't look so full anymore, because again, Aldactone is acting as an anti-androgen. Yeah, they're still getting the job done somehow, and they unfortunately they don't have so much experience with particular pharmaceutical combinations. So that would be, again, it would be a horrible idea to add in Aldactone with Nandrolone and testosterone because it acts as an anti-androgen. I would only consider Aldactone maybe the last 2-3 days before a contest prep to help prevent a little bit of sodium reuptake and promote sodium excretion while you're using perhaps another diuretic like hydrochlorothiazide or Lasix if required. And you go in for blood work and you see that your dihydrotestosterone levels have increased because you're, again, blocking the testosterone from ending up at the receptor site and resulting in additional 5-alpha reductase activity. So now dihydrotestosterone levels are a little bit higher than you expected. And you care about acne, and you care about hair loss. So, yeah, resulting to the 5-alpha reductase inhibitors, Finasteride or Dutasteride, in an attempt to get your dihydrotestosterone levels under control. Not factoring in that Finasteride and Dutasteride could have a very negative effect on your libido, especially in a combination of testosterone to Nandrolone, because you're not only inhibiting the conversion of testosterone into dihydrotestosterone, you're also inhibiting the conversion of Nandrolone into dihydronandrolone, or the conversion of progesterone into allopregnanolone. So now you're creating an even worse imbalance. And keep in mind that even though dihydrotestosterone is perhaps worse for hair loss compared to testosterone itself, dihydronandrolone is completely benign, basically. Completely benign compound that does no real activity in the body. So you're keeping more Nandrolone active, which is then going to contribute to more conversion of testosterone into estradiol, right? A lot of people report gynecomastia when they go on finasteride by itself. Maybe they do that at a higher body fat level where there's already a lot of aromatization occurring of endogenous testosterone production into estradiol. And then you go on exogenous testosterone, even a little bit supraphysiological, and you get a lot of conversion of testosterone into estradiol from the combination of testosterone with Nandrolone. Now you add in a 5-alpha reductase inhibitor on top. That's a recipe for super high estradiol. Really, your estradiol will be sky high, And maybe 60 milligrams of Raloxifine is not even potent enough to block all the receptors at the breast tissue receptor site. So while the Finasteride and Dutasteride might prevent the progression of hair loss on this particular combination of performance-enhancing drugs, the negative effect that they will have on libido and sense of well-being by skewing the balance between sex hormones and neurosteroids even further will be astronomical. You'll be looking for your libido on Pornhub or on dirty magazines or on Instagram or on OnlyFans, and you won't find it anywhere. It's strange. You look for your libido everywhere, every possible form of stimulation you can find. Nothing does it for you, right? Simply because you're combining all these compounds, which definitely you shouldn't be combining. And as you're close to giving up because you looked for your libido everywhere and you really don't understand why your libido is so horrible at the moment, even though you're making all of these gains, you decide to make the most of your off-season protocol, take the gains to the next level, and add a growth hormone secretagogue, MK677, for example, which also boosts appetite. Because you're pretty close to getting a little bit nauseous during the day, and you still want to force the food down a little bit more to make the most out of your off-season, especially since you're not wasting any calories anymore on extracurricular physical activity because your libido is gone, right? So you go with a growth hormone secretagogue or MK677. It doesn't really matter because most of the growth hormone secretagogues will not only promote growth hormone secretion, but also prolactin secretion. And MK677 in particular also raises cortisol a little bit. Not in all individuals, but I've seen it a couple times. There's some evidence that MK677 raises cortisol concentrations and raises prolactin concentrations. So the cortisol will make you feel a little bit stressed, skewing the ratio and the balance between sex hormones and neurosteroids even further. And the prolactin will... Well, how much prolactin can you produce in this protocol, right? We're already on Nandrolone, a progestogenic compound, and we have high serum estradiol concentrations. So that's already maximum prolactinemia. And then we add the growth hormone secretagogue on top, and you will be at like over the reference range prolactin. I mean, gynecomastia will just manifest overnight. Probably even on 60 milligrams of Raloxifine, because again, that's only blocking the estrogen receptor. And gynecomastia forms through the estrogen, progesterone, and prolactin receptor. And even in a cruel joke of nature, growth hormone can attach to the prolactin receptor, promoting gynecomastia formation further. So now you have high estrogen, high progestogenic activity, high prolactin, and high growth hormone stimulating the prolactin receptor potentially further. Right? It will not negatively affect libido, additionally, but it will negatively affect your gynecomastia formation. And now you have, you're basically turning into another sex, right? You're growing breast tissue and your penis is retracting on this drug combination. You want to stimulate appetite further with weed? Go ahead. Weed will also raise prolactin levels. Man, I'm doing this on purpose now, right? But yes, weed has also been associated with increased prolactin concentrations. So Nandrolone, MK677, and weed together sounds good on paper. You know, maximum appetite, maximum anabolism during the off-season. Yeah, maximum reduction in libido and maximum potential for gynecomastia formation. Now you add in a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor or a beta blocker on top. You're done. Game over. You have no interest in women in any way, shape, or form. Libido, nothing whatsoever. And the SSRIs and beta blockers have also been associated with poor libido. Now, that's been studied or examined in cases without exogenous hormones. So that's for the drug-free people that use SSRIs or beta blockers by themselves or in combination, that they notice that testosterone levels decline and the entire function of the HPTA and HPAA declines, resulting in lower testosterone concentrations. And since SSRIs alter brain chemistry, that can also have a negative effect on libido because neurotransmitters contribute to libido also. So even if you have a very favorable balance between sex hormones and neurosteroids, and you're financially secure, and you have a lot of love and respect for your partner, and there's minimal stress, if your brain chemistry is off, and your oxytocin and serotonin concentrations are not optimal or not favorable, then libido is not going to be optimal as well. So you might have a temporary down period as you're using SSRIs, where serotonin balance in the brain is not favorable for libido as well. And the beta blockers can downregulate HPTA and HPAA, and when you're not taking that into your own hands, libido is not going to be that favorable either. And especially in this combination with testosterone, nandrolone, aldactone, finasteride or dutasteride, and a growth hormone secretagogue, and I'm forgetting something, wheat perhaps, which also changes brain chemistry. An SSRI on top and a beta blocker on top. Maybe you're considering a beta blocker to prevent the negative heart remodeling that nandrolone can potentially induce. So maybe you're adding in the nebivolol or bisoprolol to prevent left ventricular hypertrophy or heart enlargement in general. You might be thinking that you're doing a good thing, but your libido will be horrible. I'm sure it will be horrible when it's combined with all the other performance-enhancing drugs that we discussed previously. And again, without libido, how are you going to get your heart rate up? Right? You're only training for so long during the day, and maybe you're doing a little bit of fasted cardio to keep your cardiovascular endurance going. And then you add a beta blocker on top, and you have no libido. I mean, you still need to do some high-intensity interval training at night, right? That's another way to ensure heart health. Anyway, I'm getting off topic again. These are all drug combinations you should avoid. Really, guys, do your due diligence researching each compound individually. Not just the cookie cutter side effects that each compound might induce, because maybe there's a 1% chance that you get a side effect from a particular compound. But when each compound has this particular side effect listed, all these effects can overlap to the point you have this particular side effect that only occurs in 1% of the instances, 100% of the time, because they all highlight each other's negative effects on libido, acne, or gynecomastia formation. So please avoid these particular compounds in these particular combinations. You can take nandrolone by itself or a combination of a relatively higher dose of testosterone and a therapeutic dose of nandrolone and get away with no acne, no negative effect on your libido, or no gynecomastia formation. You can combine them, but you have to look into the ratio. Maybe you need a much higher dose of testosterone and an aromatase inhibitor and a therapeutic dose of nandrolone and 100 milligrams to 200 milligrams per week, right? You use it for its therapeutic properties, not as your sole anabolic. And if you want to use it as your sole anabolic, Tiana Clark is that way. He's the expert when it comes to nandrolone-only cycles. And you can combine testosterone with finasteride and still have good libido if you manage your serum DHT and estradiol concentrations accordingly. And you can use testosterone and raloxifine together as well in an attempt to resolve gynecomastia formation or the progression of gynecomastia growth and hopefully reverse it a little bit as serum estradiol concentrations or prolactin concentrations are coming down because you're discontinuing the progestogenic 19-nors, the nandrolone, the trenbolone, the trestolone, etc. All right, so in those cases, testosterone and raloxifene has a practical application. Libido might still not be good. You might still get a little bit of estrogen-like activity similar to clomiphene in the brain and get a little bit into a mental turmoil that way. Also reducing libido to a certain extent, but libido should still be there when you're combining testosterone with raloxifene for a prolonged period of time in an attempt to resolve gynecomastia. Same with testosterone and MK677 or another growth hormone secretagogue, right? Same as testosterone with an SSRI. Same as testosterone with a beta blocker. You combine all of these together, game over. Really, game over. But combining testosterone with any of these compounds, adding these compounds in one at a time and having fundamental understanding of your blood work and how blood work changes after incorporating some of these compounds is invaluable. And you should be able to keep your hormone balance favorable for libido, keep your libido optimal, keep that going without any negative effect. But you don't haphazardly throw all these compounds together during the off season just for the gain train, because your libido will suffer tremendously. Even if you do it step by step. Really, if you combine testosterone with nandrolone at therapeutic dosages, and then later on you add in the finasteride, not a good idea. You add in an SSRI, probably also not a good idea. A beta blocker you can probably still get away with, but really, the more of these compounds that you combine, even with fundamental understanding of your blood work, the more you're risking a negative effect on your libido, right? You want this physique so you can put it to work. And I'll leave it at that, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you're looking for the most comprehensive guides to bodybuilding pharmacology, you can find the ebooks on my website, vigoroussteve.com/shop. Looking for personalized advice, you can find the rates to consultations in the consultations section. Contact me directly if you're interested. Follow me on Instagram @VigorSteve. Vigorous crew, you guys know what to do. Front double bicep for you guys. You guys are way too smart to combine all of these drugs and have no freaking libido to show for it, right? What's the point of the gain train if you're not putting the physique to work? Hopefully you have enough libido for one partner if you're settled. And if you have several partners, well, you can allow yourself a lot of libido, right? Thank you guys so much for watching. See you in the next video.